Hey guys, what is going on? I hope you guys are doing well today. My name is Elliot. Welcome back to The Fragrance Well. Today's topic of discussion, we are talking about dry downs, the dry down of a fragrance. This is the part of the fragrance that most people are gonna smell. Pretty much anything past 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how the fragrance develops, is going to be considered the dry down to some degree. I got 10 fragrances here that are some of my favorite dry downs in my collection. We're gonna talk about them right now. Alright, so the first one on the dry downs list is coming from the house of Mancera. This is Red Tobacco. Mancera Red Tobacco. If you know anything about this fragrance, it's pretty much known for having a very tough, challenging opening, if you will. But once you get past that opening, it's pretty much universally liked by most. I personally like the opening, but I love the dry down as well. This is a very warm, spicy tobacco fragrance. Very good for cooler weather, good for a nice night out. It is very strong. It could last all day as well, so depending on what you're doing, it could be a nice all-day scent. Some of the featured notes in this are going to be saffron, cinnamon, oud, jasmine, patchouli, tobacco, vanilla, amber, and woody notes. I think the notes that really stick out in the dry down of this fragrance is going to be the patchouli, the tobacco, the woody notes, and the amber. It is a sweet, oriental, vanillic kind of dry down, so it's very pleasant, very warm, very inviting. Like I said, the loudness that's in the opening is definitely long gone by the time you get into the dry down of this fragrance, which is why it has a little bit of a mass appeal to it as well. You know, may not tickle everyone's fancy, but I think people would overwhelmingly agree that this smells very nice once you get into the dry down. Once again, from Mancera, this is Red Tobacco. Alright, so this next one's coming from the house of Emporio Armani. This is Stronger With You, Absolutely. Stronger With You, Absolutely. Very popular fragrance in the community. I'm not sure why they don't sell this in the States, but hey, they can do what they want. Maybe they don't think it'll sell here. This fragrance is somewhat gourmand. It's very boozy. It has spice to it. It has nuttiness to it. It has sweetness. A very popular, very good fall and winter fragrance. This one features notes like rum, lavender, marron glace, bourbon vanilla, and patchouli. So for this one is enjoyable throughout the entire life of the fragrance. It's not a dry down, pleasant fragrance versus, oh, you gotta get past the opening. You're not gonna have that problem with this one for most people, but I do think those notes that are really coming across in the dry down in this are gonna be that marron glace, which is basically a candied hazelnut or a chestnut kind of vibe. So it's candied nuts in a way. You know, very warm nuts like chestnuts or hazelnuts. You also get that vanilla for sure. It's kind of boozy in the dry down. That's more so in the opening in my opinion. And you also have the patchouli, which is adding a bit of a chocolatiness to it. I really pick up chocolate-like accords with this fragrance, so it makes for a very pleasant, very yummy dry down. Once again, from Emporio Armani, Stronger With You, absolutely. Moving on, speaking of chocolate, this one is famous for having a chocolate accord in it, from Arabian Oud Resala. Arabian Oud, this is Resala. Love the bottle on this one. This is a rose, saffron, oud, vanilla, and chocolate fragrance. That's literally the notes. There's nothing else going on with that. It's just that, it does it well, and it smells absolutely delicious once it dries down. For me, the saffron can be a little bit screechy in the beginning of this fragrance. I don't know that I'd call it challenging. I just think that could be a turn off for some folks, but after about 15 minutes, that calms down a bit. Then you really get into the rose and the oud combination, and supporting it is vanilla and chocolate. The chocolate is very well done in this fragrance. It smells like a chocolate candy bar pretty much throughout the life of the fragrance after you get past that saffron opening. Very strong fragrance, lasts a long time. Really good if you're gonna be outdoors for fall and winter primarily, as most of these fragrances are gonna be for that on this list. Good for a night out as well, particularly here in the States. I wouldn't really call this a work environment kind of fragrance, but hey, if you wanna take that risk, go have at it. But that's pretty much all there is to say about this fragrance. The fragrance is pretty straightforward in what it does, and it does it well. Once again, from Arabian Oud Resala. Okay guys, and we're moving on. The next one's coming from the house of Acqua di Parma. This is Sandalo. Acqua di Parma Sandalo. This fragrance is rarely, if ever, talked about in the community. I don't see too many people mentioning it. Although those that know about it, know about it. So basically a sandalwood fragrance. It also has some spiciness, a little bit of aromatic, primarily coming from lavender, and some nice citrus to kind of give it a little bit of a pop in the opening of the fragrance. Features notes like petitgrain, bergamot, orange, lemon, cardamom, lavender, Indian sandalwood, tonka bean, and amber. In the dry down of this fragrance, that cardamom does stick around a little bit, but primarily it's going to be, of course, sandalwood and amber. It's very smooth, very creamy, kind of cozy. Once it gets into that dry down, very pleasant. Not a huge projector, not necessarily something that I would say would get you a ton of compliments, but it is very pleasant and I enjoy that part of the fragrance. Smells very good. It's a little bit different, definitely kind of indicative of that Italian style of fragrance, which, you know, Acqua di Parma being an Italian fragrance house, they're staying very true to that with this one. You can see my collar comes off. When I pull the cap off, it just gets stuck in there, but as long as it's not ripping off my atomizer, I'm not complaining. Yeah, anyways, just something a little bit different, but a very nice fragrance, nothing mind-blowing. I'll be honest, there's probably far better sandalwood fragrances out there, but this one is a good one nonetheless. Once again from Acqua di Parma, this is Sandalo. All right, moving on. We got something that's a little bit more complex. This one goes through a number of changes as the fragrance dries down. From the house of Thameen, London, Amber Room. Thameen, London, Amber Room. So you could guess that part of the dry down of this is going to be amber, but it's also rose, there's spices, a little bit of citrus on the top, but my favorite thing about this is the patchouli in the heart of the fragrance. Some other featured notes are ginger, bergamot, grapefruit, Bulgarian rose, cinnamon, patchouli, amber, tonka bean, and frankincense. But like I just said, it's the patchouli for me in the heart of this fragrance. It really just kind of pops forward for about an hour throughout the life of the fragrance, and man, it is stunning. It is so smooth, nice kind of chocolate cake kind of vibe, but not, you know, too chocolatey. It has the earthiness to it as well, which not something that everybody's going to be a fan of, but it's something I really, really like. But you also just still have that beautiful amber in the dry down. You got a little bit of sweetness with tonka bean. It's very smooth, very pleasant. Keep some of that cardamom spice throughout. Love the dry down of this fragrance. This one here is, if you're gonna wear it outdoors, also kind of fall. It can work in spring too, you know, if you don't go too heavy with it. It can be a winter fragrance too. Date night scent, night out, nice evening out scent. Yeah, this one here will definitely get the job done. Has a little bit of a sex appeal to it. Great fragrance from the house of Thameen, London, with an awesome dry down. Amber Room once again. Okay guys, so this next one's coming from the house of Vilhelm Parfumerie, and this one is challenging, I'm not gonna lie. But I like how it dries down because it smooths out the roughness around the edges of this one once you really get into the dry down. From the house of Vilhelm, once again, this is London Funk. Vilhelm Parfumerie's London Funk. So this fragrance is very green and very woody and pretty much nothing else. You have to like green fragrances with this. There is a lot of woods in this, a lot of green notes, almost like sticking like an evergreen tree branch up your nose. I mean, it's that green. Also kind of has a little bit of a cannabis vibe to it. Features notes like basil, juniper, driftwood, blackcurrant, cedarwood, mate, sandalwood, and vetiver and ambergris. Now the fragrance pretty much stays green throughout the life of it, but it does calm down a bit, and when you really get into the dry down, that ambergris creates almost like a resinous sweetness to this fragrance that kind of reminds me of tree sap. Tree sap, not necessarily something that I think a lot of people would necessarily appreciate, but that's what I like about it because it doesn't stay so sharp throughout the entire life of the fragrance. It does calm down a bit. This one's not gonna be everyone's cup of tea, I understand that, but like I said, for me, this is some of my favorite dry downs in my collection, and this one is a part of that, so I'm gonna talk about it. If you got any interest in this one, definitely sample it first. Like I said, just because it has that kind of cannabis vibe might draw some people's attention to it, but it's nothing like a Hindu Kush or anything like that, or even a Black Afghano. Give it a try first. From the house of Vilhelm Parfumerie, London Funk. Okay guys, this next one's coming from the house of Mason Francis Kirk John. This is Grand Soir. Mason Francis Kirk John Grand Soir. If you know anything about this fragrance, it is heavily sweet and heavily resinous. This fragrance is a sticky fragrance. If you were to stick your hand in this fragrance, it almost smells like it would come out just sticky and gooey and it just make a complete mess. Pretty straightforward fragrance. You got labdanum, benzoin, vanilla, amber, and tonka bean. It pretty much smells that same way, resinous, sticky, sweet, kind of warm throughout the life of the fragrance, but once you really get into the deep dry down, you're more so getting vanilla and amber. Those two together just make this smell amazing on the dry down. Now, that's not a very unique dry down. There's plenty of fragrances that have vanilla that really come across in the dry down. In fact, I've got another one that kind of does the same thing, but it does it in a different way. But that being said, I just like how this one does it, so I'm gonna feature it in this list. Because of how sticky and heavy this one is, it's definitely primarily a fall and winter fragrance. If you're wearing it in an air-conditioned environment, yeah, you could probably pull it off maybe spring and fall. If it's really, really hot outside, this one can probably become overwhelming really quick. So if you're gonna wear it to an indoor place, make sure you're not gonna spend too much time outside because it can be a bit much. This is definitely a cool weather fragrance. Primarily an evening and nighttime wear fragrance. You can dress it up, maybe dress it down, but not too much, but you know, use it at your discretion. From MFK Grand Soir. All right, and this next one's coming from the house of Bond number 9, Lafayette Street. Bond number 9's Lafayette Street. This one here is a primarily springtime fragrance, but it pretty much can be worn all year round. Let me give it a spray. I haven't sprayed in a while. I don't have a cap. This is a tester fragrance. Yeah, very bright, lots of florals in it, has a lot of spice off the top, has a kind of an apple accord to give it a little bit of crispness to it as well. Once it dries down, you really get a lot of vanilla and ambergris. Some of the featured notes are bergamot, apple, coriander, floral notes, tonka bean, ambroxan, ambergris, and vanilla. When I first was discovering this fragrance, I actually had it sprayed on my skin and had 3 other fragrances sprayed like around my arms as well. Not the best way to test a fragrance. Usually the best way to test a fragrance on your skin is wear it by itself, but I had come from the mall and so I was just testing it out. And once the fragrances had been on my skin for about 2.5 hours, the vanilla in this one really started to pop on my skin and I knew instantly that I had to pick this one up. So great dry down on this. Just a very open and bright vanillic sweetness to it once it dries down, and that's what makes this one so mass appealing. Once again from Bond number 9, this is Lafayette Street. Okay, so the next one's coming from the house of Marc-Antoine Barrois. This is Ganymede. Marc-Antoine Barrois' Ganymede. Yeah, hype beast fragrance. A lot of people talk about it. Not everybody likes it, but this is a mineralic, suede-like, leathery, little bit orange, slightly sweet fragrance. Featured notes in this are saffron, Italian mandarin, Chinese osmanthus, violet, akigala wood, and immortelle. So when you first spray this on, you get that pop of spice from the saffron. You definitely get an orange type of vibe. The mineral notes in this are very clear throughout the life of the entire fragrance. Once you get a little bit deeper into the dry down, the leather comes a little bit more forward. But when you're kind of all the way in the dry down of this, you pretty much are getting that immortelle, and it's coming across in kind of a burnt sugar candied kind of way. That's what I love about this fragrance when it gets into the dry down. I love that smell. Interestingly enough, it kind of smells like Flintstone candies, which might not sound like a good thing, but it's not like super powdery and chalky like a Flintstone vitamin, rather, not candy, but Flintstone vitamin would smell. If you're a 90s baby or you grew up in the 90s, you know about the Flintstone vitamins. Once again, from Marc-Antoine Barrois, this is Ganymede. All right, and last but certainly not least, from the house of Tom Ford, this is Beau de Jour. Tom Ford's Beau de Jour, a modern take on a classic aromatic fougere. This one features a lot of lavender in the opening, but then you get a lot of oak moss, a lot of amber and patchouli, and it just dries down to a classy yet subtly sweet gentleman's fragrance, and it smells so good. Like I mentioned, you're gonna get lavender in this. You're also gonna get Cape Snowbush, geranium, basil, oak moss, amber, and patchouli. That lavender can almost be a little off-putting because it is so forward when you first spray this on. It almost comes across kind of pungent, if you will. Lots of lavender in the opening. But that calms down after a few minutes, and then you get lots of oak moss, a little bit of geranium to kind of smooth it out a bit, but there's a sweet amber accord that ties in with patchouli in the dry down of this fragrance, and it is heavenly. It gets you compliments. It lasts a long time. Just a beautiful fragrance and an even better dry down in my opinion. Once again from Tom Ford, Beau de Jour. Okay guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. That was 10 fragrances that have some of my favorite dry downs within my collection. Let me know down in the comments below, what are some fragrances that you love the dry down? The dry down doesn't necessarily have to be better than the opening. It's just, you know, just something that has a good dry down, because a good dry down is what makes a complete fragrance in my opinion, because that is what most people are going to smell. Remember to be well and smell well, and I will see you in the next episode of The Fragrance Wheel. Have a great day.